Well, good evening. I'm going to sit here for a little while to see whether you're going to join me and to play a little bit before we fully get started. Wonderful. So, hello and welcome to the Mystery School, or at least a broadcast about what a Mystery School is and hopefully how I'm going to start one. So the first thing to do would probably be introduce myself and say why on earth I would think I might be qualified in any way, shape or form to start a mystery school. And then of course we've got to talk about what a mystery school is. I'm not qualified in any way, shape or form to start a mystery school. There's no possibility that anybody really is, really. It's one of those things that you're asked to do from up above and you give it a go. So that'll have filled you with confidence. I'm absolutely sure about that. However, who am I? Well, I'm Maggie Whitehouse, and I'm author of the following books: The Illustrated History of Kabbalah, Total Kabbalah. I hope this is showing up better for you than for me because I'm seeing it in a mirror format. Living Kabbalah, and Kabbalah Made Easy, as well as quite a few other books, which actually nearly all of them have a Kabbalistic theme. And I've been studying Kabbalah now for more than 20 years and teaching it for pretty much the same time. And it's, for me, a wonderful structure that helps work out the meaning of life, the universe, and everything. And if you don't understand the particular structure that I'm going to take you through this evening, that's fine. The thing about a mystery school is it's a school of the soul. That's a term coined by my teacher, Zev Ben Shimon Halevi. And it is entirely a personal thing whether a particular school of the soul works for you or whether it doesn't. And you have to find the one that's right for you. And if you watch this broadcast or the recording on YouTube and halfway through or at the end of it you go, nah, this isn't for me, that's terrific, because you can then eliminate Kabbalah, or at least this school of Kabbalah, from your search and find something that's really going to suit you even better. So where do we begin? A mystery school is a place where people can discuss matters of the soul and learn to develop the soul. How to develop your soul is a complex process. And why I love Kabbalah is because it really helps me. Goodness me, that's an interesting noise. That's somebody ringing. No idea what to do about that. Anybody else got any idea about that? Incidentally, you can notice that on the right-hand side of the screen, if you're watching live, there is a question and answer symbol, a sort of column. So you can type a question in there. I don't know quite how it works. I'm absolutely a Google Hangouts virgin here, but I'm sure it does work. And when I tried it out with a few friends earlier in the week, it did work. So you can type a question in, and if I can, I'll answer it. And I'll get back to what a mystery school is. It's a place of safety where you develop your soul, where you learn to understand who you really, really are. And a Kabbalistic friend of mine once said, one of the great tasks of life is to learn from who you think you are to who you really are to who you're meant to be. And coming into the area of the soul is where you start to work out who you're meant to be. And I don't mean that in a kind of judgmental way, as in you're not who you're meant to be now, because we're exactly where we need to be right now, in the right place and the right time. But there are also yearnings or callings that we have within us. And within me, one of the things that I've always wanted to do is teach Kabbalah. Become a teacher, become somebody who can perhaps inspire other people. And it's important to say at this point here that if this mystery school does take off, then it isn't going to be just me who'll be teaching. I'm hoping very much that many of the people in my tradition will come along and teach too. The teaching, the way, the truth is a very personal thing. There is an ultimate truth, but we as human beings find it quite hard to get to grips with that. So the best we can do is come to the nearest approximation that we have. And that's why I love Kabbalah, because it's a structure. It's just that, it's scaffolding. It's not a religion. It's been kept safe by the Jewish faith for many, many centuries. There's Christian Kabbalah as well, but the primary teaching has always been within the Jewish community. And somebody just asked a question, so I'll get to that in a minute, but I have to put my specs on. But it is universal. That's the whole idea. Right, good question. First question comes in, what is the soul? The soul is the part of us that's immortal. We have a body, we have a psyche, we have an identity. But the soul is the aspect of us which pre-exists and post-exists at death. And although you hear all sorts of scary things in religions about what happens after death, about purgatory and punishment, the soul is ultimately pure. When you die, you go through to the other side. And even though you may be in the illusion on the other side, according to how you died, that you aren't experiencing heaven, the soul actually knows that. The soul is the part of us which is in and out of daily life. It's like being part of God and external to God. It's the link point. And my favorite phrase for it is, the soul is the link between heaven and earth, or the soul is the kiss between heaven and earth. It's the part of us that is all knowing and eternal. And our soul carries messages from life to life, before life, after life, whether there is reincarnation. I think there is, but what do I know? I certainly have memories that are either from the Akashic record or from previous life, which have been helpful to me in this one. But certainly my soul understands a lot more than I do about what path I am on in this life. My ego has absolutely resisted doing this mystery school. Really, really resisted it, being very afraid of it, and thinking that there would be judgment and blame associated with it. But my soul has got me here. And my soul is taking it forward. And that's hopefully where we're going to be with this. The point of Kabbalah, again, is this structure, this scaffolding. And although the diagrams can look pretty scary, I'll be showing you the diagrams a bit more clearly. You can see a couple of them behind me. They are, once you get to know them, like a language. And if you have a language to speak, you can actually start to understand your soul. The point of a mystery school or a school of the soul is to help you understand your soul, not my soul. You're not meant to understand, well, you can understand it, it might be helpful. You're not meant to follow my path. You're not meant to follow any teacher's path. And in fact, the greatest goal of any teacher within a mystery school is to watch the student go past them, to watch the student grow up, if you like, and find their own path, and probably to leave. The other thing about a mystery school is that it's meant to be hard to get into and very easy to leave. Now, watching this doesn't mean to say you're in a mystery school. We're just introducing it here, or I'm making a clumsy attempt at introducing it here. As this develops, we'll be doing courses and workshops, and that's not the royal we, that's me and hopefully other teachers too. But there will also be online groups. Those online groups will always be free. The teaching is free. We always have to earn a living. And if you've been watching this thinking, what's she trying to sell? I'll flog you my books and my workshops and my for sale webinars right, left and center. Absolutely. I like paying the mortgage, and I like having food, and I like buying new clothes every now and then. And I like having fun and going on holidays. But the teaching itself, there should always be something that is free, that is available. So let's get on a little bit about talking about what Kabbalah is. And again, it's not a religion. It's not anything that I want you to think that you have to be a follower of anything to get to. It's not. It's absolutely and utterly a free system. You can be a Kabbalist and a Buddhist, a Kabbalist and an agnostic. Probably not a Kabbalist and an atheist. That might be a bit challenging, because the preconception in Kabbalah is that there is a God, whatever you want to call it, and that we are here on earth to help God behold God. We are here as reflections of the divine, and we reflect God back to God. Now, I personally think that we are images of the divine. We are actually part of the divine. I'm part of God and you're part of God. But language is quite a tricky thing sometimes, and people can make different understandings and different perceptions of that kind of thing. So the Kabbalistic teaching is to help God behold God, as in to reflect divinity back to it. So it's a huge responsibility, really, because what we're experiencing, living, doing, teaching, is reflecting back to God what God is. So that is strengthening or weakening God according to how we're doing it. Other teachings, other traditions like Christianity will say we're children of God, which is also a good analogy. Human beings being children of God and angels being servants of God. Angels are not human according to the Kabbalistic tradition. Guides are human, discarnate souls who help us in our work, but angels are not human. So this Kabbalistic structure and this Kabbalistic teaching are really all about received wisdom. And I'm sure you know what it's like when you don't know what to say sometimes, or you are praying for help, or you just need to be helped. And something will just come into your head that is something you've never even thought about. And that's part of the received wisdom. It's about hearing for yourself what the divine message is for you. Now I'm going to do the screen share now, which is a first, so hopefully you can see it. Wonderful. So this is Life, the Universe, and Everything Through the Eyes of Mystical Judaism and Christianity. And really this image shows us everything we need to know, simply because it is exactly how we experience the divine, the mysteries of the divine. We come out of the everyday world through to a wider world. We actually come into ourselves more than anything else. And it's important that we actually understand that we are much, much bigger and greater and more wonderful than we can possibly conceive of. Now I've got to work out to get how back to the picture of me. I think I unscreen share. And then I've got to try and find the next picture. Oh, there I am. Well, that's exciting, isn't it? Then I've got to find the next picture on the PowerPoint, which is going to be quite a bit of fun, but I'm sure I can do it. In fact, you probably just go. Uh-oh, I've got the slideshow going now. That wasn't intended, but I'm sure it'll be all right. Yikes. May have to edit this. Right, okay, I've now got the second picture up, so I will hopefully manage to click through for you. And forgive me for not being entirely au fait with this. Presumably you can just see me at the moment. Yeah, oh, there I am. How exciting. Okay, so let's move to the screen share again and talk a little bit about, there we go. Kabbalah is a Hebrew word which just means receive. And it's spelt many different ways, Kabbalah with a K or a Q or a C. And in fact, it should be spelt with a Q because it's from the Hebrew letters Quoth, Beit, and Lamed, QBLH. And they just simply mean to receive. So what is it to receive? It's simply to listen. And the only reason we ever need a teacher is because we're not listening very clearly. If you've ever read any of the Conversations with God books, you've probably found that while you were reading them, you actually were starting to receive messages coming through to you because you'd opened up to the concept of God or divinity or whatever you want to call it, speaking to you. I know every time I pick up one of those books, I can put it down and start writing out pretty much the same kind of thing as Neil Donald Walsh does. But it's also very useful to have somebody around who may have an extension of knowledge in some kind of scaffolding who can guide you through. Now, Kabbalah is very specific in that it teaches that there are four worlds, four levels of existence. There's the physical world, the psychological world, the spiritual world, and the divine world. And as I go back to the screen share now, I'm going to show you some of the diagrams. Hopefully I am. There we go. Apparently they give you a chance to edit this later, which sounds entirely good. Yeah. So these are the diagrams that are generally used. And I put try not to panic in case you're new to Kabbalah. There's the tree of life on the left, and there's something called Jacob's ladder on the right. And in the middle is a picture of the menorah. Now, the menorah was what ancient people in biblical times used for the tree of life. And on that 7-branch candlestick, they placed everything to do with the world and the universe, themselves and life and everything. And it became updated and changed in the 12th century to make it much clearer for people. And if you're looking at the diagram on the left and on the right, and you're thinking, that's got nothing to do with anything that's clear, that's extremely complicated, you have my sympathies. Now, I think you can see my cursor moving. So let's look at the tree of life to start with. It's got a central column, which is consciousness, a left-hand column, which is passive or receptive, and a right-hand column, which is active. And it's also got several levels to it. And it represents the physical world, the psychological world. All of this is the psychological world. But the physical world impinges, implodes, is part of the psychological world. And at the top, there's the spiritual world. And the tree of life actually just touches the divine world. So we're taught that there are specifically 4 worlds. And if we move over to the right-hand diagram, you can see that there are actually 4 trees of life in it. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the same 4 worlds are expressed here. This is the physical. The whole of it is the psychological. This is the spiritual, and the top circle there is known as a sphere, touches the divine world. So this at the bottom is physicality, which blends in with our psyche, our emotions, and where our souls are, which blends in with our spirit, which blends in with the divine part of us. So we are divine, spiritual, psychological, physical beings. And we are definitely divine beings, as well as all the rest. Even when we have a really bad day, we are divine beings. And Kabbalah teaches that humanity is the only species, certainly on this planet, which embraces all 4 worlds. Our animal friends live in the physical and the psychological worlds. They aren't as complex as us. They aren't extraordinarily messed up the way we are. We have so much more to play with, and so much more that can make us feel good or bad. So changing pictures now, this is Adam Kadmon, which is called the fiery man, which is Hebrew letters making up the name, hopefully, of Adam Kadmon. My Hebrew is pretty awful. Now, the point of this thing, Adam Kadmon, is this is the only begotten son, according to Kabbalah. If you're a Christian, you will have heard the phrase that Jesus Christ is the only begotten Son of God. Jesus Christ represents Adam Kadmon, but for a Kabbalist, he is not Adam Kadmon. He is a representation of the perfect man. And Adam Kadmon is part of the story of creation in Kabbalah, which I really love. The story of creation is that God, in its wonder and beauty and glory and delight, wished to behold God, wished to experience itself in manifold existence, and therefore had to create creation in which to play and have fun and experience every single aspect of itself. And Adam Kadmon is the human aspect of that creation. And the teaching says that every single human being that ever was and ever will be and is right now is one cell in the body of Adam Kadmon, which is the only begotten child of God. So we are all one cell in this divine baby. And as we grow and develop and perfect, this baby also grows and develops and perfects. And Kabbalah teaches that every single human being will eventually be Christed. We will become perfect. And when we are perfect, then the whole purpose of creation is completed. And when the whole purpose of creation is completed, then the game is over. What happens then? No idea. That will be what we call the end of the world, I guess. Okay, so I'm ending the screen share for the moment. Oh, well, that's exciting. I've got that one wrong, haven't I? Far too many windows open. Okay, we're back. We probably never went away your end. Apologise for that. God, I hope we can edit this before it gets on YouTube. So let's get that chat icon up again so you can ask questions if you want to. There we go. Right. So where are we? Humanity, every single one of us is an aspect of God. So every one of us, our soul is an intrinsic part of what's known as Adam Kadmon. And every single one of us is unique and divine. And a mystery school is here to help us remember that, to help us find out what our greater good and greater work is in the world. I've been a member of a School of the Soul for many years, and this particular one meets weekly for 3 terms a year in a specific location in London. And there are other ones all around the world, and I'm sure there are many online ones as well that aren't just Kabbalistic. However, the reason why I'm starting this one, in a rather clunky way, but I'll get better at it, is because due to my books and due to teaching around the world, I've had so many people come and say, how do I study? How do I continue this? And using the internet is a very simple, sensible way of doing it. Now, this webinar on Google Hangouts is public, but all future ones for the Mystery School will be by invitation. That's not to exclude anybody, it's just to make sure that they are private so that they can become a sacred space. So if you're watching this and you've borne with me through the technical issues, which are purely mine, then please email me if you want to be a part of this school, and we can take it from there. Or you can go to my website, which is maggywhitehouse.com, and click on the icon that says Mystery School. It's Maggy with a Y, M-A-G-G-Y, whitehouse.com. No dot between the Maggie and the White House. So let's say a little bit more about Kabbalah. It's an oral tradition, and I've written books about it. My teachers have written books about it, and many people I know have written books about it, but most books on Kabbalah are really quite hard to understand because it is an oral tradition. By the time you've written a book about it, the book's out of date. Kabbalah has to update with every single generation. And that's where these things can go wrong. This is where schools of the soul, mystery schools, can go hideously wrong, in that people are prone to stick to the past, stick to the way things were. We don't like change very much. And as soon as a book is written, then it's out of date. If it's a book by a teacher that somebody respects, then people are going to stick to the teaching in that book and they may not update it. Whereas if you have a discussion group, then you are always going to be bringing the ancient teaching into the modern world. And no teaching is worth anything if it isn't relevant for the day. Got another question now from Don. How does the emotional world and the intellectual world fit into the four worlds? Goodness me, Don, that's a deep question for a beginning webinar on just introducing the whole thing. Well, the emotional world is the psyche. And in fact, the emotions are generally locked in the side triads, which are, if I point up here to the tree behind me, that's probably the best way of doing it, actually. These are the areas of the psyche which are the emotions. If you see, this is the physical world here, and above is the spiritual world. And in fact, these ones all around here are emotions to a certain extent, though those are more intellectual. That triad and that triad are intellectual concepts, how we understand things intellectually. These are how we understand things emotionally, but they're also very tied in with the subconscious. So this is quite deep stuff to get into at the beginning. But let's have a look at the tree. Why don't we do that? And sorry if it's a bit blurred. I think it's okay. Down at the base here is our physical body. It's the representation of the physical body. The next one up represents the ego, our everyday mind, our tribal consciousness, how we relate to the world and how we appear socially. These two-side sephirot, as they're called here, represent our thought processes and our active, attractive processes. So we think something, we do it, or we do something and then we think it. And then at the crown of the physical world, in the center of the psyche and at the base of the spiritual world, is a place called Tiferet, which is our real self. You call it the solar plexus chakra, perhaps, but this is the true me at that level. And as you can tell, this one is led into by all the other paths. These are the intellectual concepts here, the emotional concepts here, and from here are the physical and lower psyche concepts like instincts and pulls, tugs, feelings. Down here are feelings and up there are emotions. Feelings are transitory, whereas emotions are much deeper held, much more enduring. So they are part of the greater tree, Jacob's ladder, except that the emotions and feelings and intellectual concepts of every single human being are unique. So if you look at the ladder on this side, and if you're new to Kabbalah, forgive me if we're going off on a tangent here, because it's probably sounding like blah, 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 to you. If you look at the Jacob's ladder, you'll see this is the Kabbalistic diagram of the four worlds. You'll see that there's the white at the top, which is the divine, and then trying to put my finger around it so you can see that's the world of the spirit, which comes into the world of the psyche, which comes into the world of the physical. But these side triads here, these triangles, only belong to the psychological world. Each world, the levels of the emotions are unique to the individual person, and therefore we have to sort them out and work with them ourselves. And how we perceive life emotionally and intellectually is going to distort or improve the whole of the rest of our worlds. I can't really explain that anymore tonight without going even more into it even more complexly. But this diagram, these diagrams here are the diagrams of perfect human beings, perfect ones. And we're none of us perfect. We're all wobbly all over the place. And certainly for me, this triad here on the left-hand side, which is the triad of pain, ruled by Scorpio, has been very powerful for a lot of my life and has sort of extended, so it's distorted the rest of my psyche. So hopefully that answers it a little bit. Anyway, now, where were we? No idea. So oral tradition, that's right, updating with every generation. And if you think about it, Kabbalah is very, very old. It's certainly as old as the Bible. It dates back, they say, 4,000 years, because it is just the way, the received tradition. And it's the received tradition that is honored in the Western tradition. It's the only Western mystical tradition that is believed to be complete. So it is entirely appropriate for the people of the book, which is Jews, Christians, and Muslims. And it certainly dates back. It's all the way through the Bible. One of my favorite jobs is interpreting the Kabbalah inside the Bible, not because you're Jewish, Christian, or Islamic, but because these are eternal truths with this ancient structure. And I think it's very important to say here, if you want to be a mystic, you must transcend all faith. There is no true mystic in the world who still holds on to a religion. You can work within a religion, that's another structure, and it's very useful, but the mystic is one who's in direct communication with God, and therefore does not require the religion to be the foundation. It can be the guidelines, but it isn't the be-all and end-all of everything. So back in biblical days, very few people read and very few people wrote. In fact, Bart Ehrman, who wrote this wonderful book called Misquoting Jesus, which I do recommend, I must admit, says that pretty much 99% of the world in biblical days was what we call illiterate. And that's not being rude. There were no novels to read. There was very little to do to read. You had documents of exchanges of contracts, and you had religious texts, and people would go to a scribe to write a letter to somebody, and the scribe would, they dictate it, the scribe would write it, and then it would be sent to a scribe on the other end who'd read it to the people on the other end. There really wasn't any need to read or write. So the texts that we take as gospel, literally now, really didn't exist for a long, long time. People would have some scrolls, but the idea was that the teacher, the rabbi, would read them to you and then interpret them, and then you debate them and debate them and debate them and debate them and debate them. There's a lovely saying called 2 Jews, 3 opinions. And if you've ever seen footage of a yeshiva, which is a school usually in Israel where young Jewish men and older Jewish men too go to study Kabbalah and the Talmud, the first 5 books of the Bible, and the Torah, first 5 books of the Bible, and the Talmud, which is the commentaries on the Bible, you'll find that they talk and talk and talk and debate and debate and debate and get really animated and enthusiastic about it. And if you are a Kabbalist and you want to talk about the Bible, you can get really animated and enthusiastic about it, because you can stick it onto these diagrams and say, yeah, but what about that? And that means that, and this goes here, and wow, and how relevant that is to me. So in ancient days, the teachers, the rabbis like Jesus and all the other ancient teachers, would go around from village to village, and they would understand this structure, which was placed on the menorah, because they would have learnt it at the foot of their own teacher, and they would tell stories that fitted in with it. And people would come to recognize these stories and to appreciate them and to notice the patterns within them. All stories have patterns. Good stories have patterns. Most of our nursery rhymes have patterns. Cinderella, for example, my teacher, Ben Shimon Halevi, did a most wonderful interpretation of Cinderella as a Kabbalistic story. And it truly is one, but I'll leave him to tell you that one if you ever get to see him or read any of his books. So it's an oral tradition, best taught through question and answer, because then it becomes relevant to you. There's no book you can ever read that is going to be entirely relevant to you. And it'll be relevant to the author because the author's putting their own heart and soul in it. But for most other people, it's going to be something where you can't quite, you can get to most of it, but if you can't ask the question about you, you can't necessarily get all the way. So what else is there to tell you about Kabbalah, apart from the fact that it's the structure that the Bible was written on? And it truly is. Whether it was intended or not, the Bible is extraordinarily Kabbalistic. I don't know about the Quran. I don't know if it is or it isn't. That's not my line of expertise. However, it's also worth saying there are lots of different branches of Kabbalah. Probably should have said that earlier. The branch that I trained in is called the Toledano tradition. But I've also trained with Dr. David Goddard, and I've also worked with a gentleman called Tao Malachi, and I'm a very great follower and fan of Father Richard Rohr, who is a mystical Christian. But there are many other forms of Kabbalah. The one promise I will make to you as this mystery school develops, and I have no idea how it's going to develop, I've just been asked to do it, therefore I shall do it, and the teachers will come, and the system will come, and the structure will come. But there are many other different schools or ways that you can learn Kabbalah. The most well-known is probably the Kabbalah Center. I've never been there. I know very, very little about it. I've written about it in my books, but that's all I know from journalism. But there is no link between this mystery school and the Kabbalah Center, nor with B'nai B'rith, which is another Kabbalistic group, nor with anybody else, and actually not exactly with the Toledano tradition either, though I deeply revere and love that tradition and have learned very much from it. What I'm going to be teaching is a meld of that tradition and Richard Rohr's tradition and the other alchemical and sacred traditions. Every school has to be its own school. And when the time has come for that school to die, the school will die. And the important thing about it is that any school that thrives will develop pupils who become teachers, who will then take the teaching out to make it relevant for their generation. So let's assume that, for example, this school lasts for 20 years and develops and grows wonderfully, and I and other teachers teach people here some wonderful things and some ways of finding your own pathway to understanding God. When I die, or when I stop, this school dies, end. Because what will happen is it will have offshoots of other schools from people who've learned what they needed to learn from this and started again in a way that's relevant for the people who want to learn from them. Again, the goal of the teacher is to pass on everything they can and watch the pupil excel and become more than they ever were. So what else can I tell you? Who studies Kabbalah? Well, you will be told if you go into a Jewish community that it's only studied by men over 40 years old. Definitely not by women. Well, guess what? I'm not Jewish and I'm not a bloke. If I were a bloke and I were in drag, I'd have big hair and much better makeup, trust me. It's all about taking it into the world that's relevant again today. Now, in the ancient days, it's believed that men mostly studied Kabbalah in groups or cabals, secret groups. And secret doesn't mean that they're men meaning to exclude you for a bad reason. The word secret and the word sacred come from the same root. Therefore, anything that's sacred is going to be a little bit secret. Jesus had this great saying, don't cast pearls before swine, which seems to be really, really mean. But if you're studying the esoteric work at any depth, you need to be in a group of companions who can help you study it at the same level as you, which is why a good mystery school will have different levels of classes for people and different levels of discussion groups so that everybody's on the same level in that group. If you're in a group that is way, way beyond you, then you're not going to get an awful lot out of it. When I first went to study Kabbalah at Halevi's, I sat there in a complete stew for weeks going, what? I just knew that there was something there I really wanted to hold on to, but it took a long time to get there. And in fact, Halevi insists for the first 3 sessions when you go to his groups that you don't speak. And of course, you're so tempted to speak and ask questions, but you'd end up taking the energy of the group down because the questions you'd be asking would not be, they'd be taking everybody back to first steps. Then, of course, by the 3rd session, you've got to the point where you're so engrossed by it, you don't want to ask a question. And you've got this opportunity to ask a question, and you go, no, actually, I want to learn a bit here. And that's very important because in a mystery school, you have to learn to deal with the ego, which is a bit that wants to show off, and move up through the self to the soul, which is the part of you that receives. It's another explanation, God, of what the soul is. The soul is the receptor of the word of God. And if we are clear, then we can hear that word. But we're not clear. We've got so much of that emotional and intellectual stuff that has been trained into us ever since we were born, probably with the best of good intentions by teachers and parents, and sometimes not with the best of good intentions. But whatever happens, the soul gets compressed or overexpanded, and we can end up being really quite damaged at that level. And the goal of the School of the Soul is to help us to unravel that. Just unravel all the problems around it and the issues around it and the beliefs around it. And that usually means dumping a lot of the things that you think that you believe, which comes at the level of the ego. I was going to show you some more stuff from the PowerPoint, but I'm obviously so utterly incompetent at doing the screen share at the moment that I'm going to talk you through a couple more things. And the first is stages and states of life. One of the things which Kabbalah teaches so beautifully through this diagram of the tree of life is that you've got this part of you that is in touch with the physical world, and this part of you which is in touch with the spiritual world, and these side parts of you which are unique to you and actually aren't really involved in either of the worlds. And in all of them we have stages and states. Our stages of life are represented here in our physical world, and our state of life is represented by the side triads. Now, stages and states are simple, really. Stages are where you are in your tribe, what your tribal learning is. And states are how you've developed your psyche and how close you are to being in contact with truth, as in with God, with compassion, with humanity, with discernment. Now, the soul is made up of three aspects of your own psyche, unique to you. No other soul is the same as yours, which is why astrology actually works, because a good astrologer will take you through the ramifications of the destiny of your soul and how it relates to you. But the soul is made up of three elements within us: how we perceive truth, how we discern or judge things, and how we are loving. Soul is made up of truth and beauty. Truth and beauty are the one thing, because if it isn't true, it won't be beautiful. And if it is true, it will be beautiful. That's not glamorous, but beautiful. Anything that is true to you has a beauty to it. And that may be an absolute fierce beauty, a very strange beauty, but it will be a beauty. The example I always give of that is when my father died. He was going into surgery for a heart bypass. And when he was due to go down to the surgery, my stepmother phoned and said, he's had a heart attack on the way into the surgery, you've got to come, you've got to come. Now, I knew at that point the truth, which was that he was going to die. And I didn't get up and rush off to the hospital because I wouldn't have got there in time. Apart from anything else, I knew that the truth was this was his time. So I went and sat in the garden and meditated and waited for the phone call that would tell me that he had died. And there was a really strange beauty in the sadness of that moment, of the knowing that it was true that he was dying or was already dead, and the beauty that it was the perfect thing. And the rightness in it was that because I didn't get up and rush, I was able to sit in the garden and meditate, get up, have some breakfast, and make quite sure I was going to be strong enough to face the day that was ahead, which involved talking with my birth mother, my stepmother, finding my brother who was on holiday and doing all the administration stuff. So the point was that sitting in that truth and that beauty gave me a lot of strength to face that day. Now, it required also discernment or judgment and compassion. Now, the discernment judgment was there any point in my actually jumping into the car unprepared, frightened, when I had many miles to go before I could get there, and wouldn't be able to do anything and might be driving even unsafely because I'd be so afraid or worried. And the love in that case was actually for me and also for my birth mother and my brother and my stepmother and everyone else around me. It was compassion, in that I knew I had to be really strong for everybody, including myself. So it all worked out together in that the soul level was saying, be still and know that it's okay. Whereas my ego was going, oh my God, my father's dying. Oh my God, I've got to get in the car. I've got to run. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. I've got to do the other. So of course I completely lost track of where I was now. What were we talking about? We were talking about... no idea. All right, I'll start off on another track. If one of you wants to post a question that reminds me of what I was talking about, or maybe I'll get back to it anyway. Good grief. Oh yes, stages and states. Hooray! Good news, it comes back to you eventually. And didn't even leave the room and come back into it to forget what I was talking about. So your stage of life is based around the ego, and that's what your training is, and where you live in society and your age. For example, you may be at a stage, you may have been raised by a family that is very eco-conscious, maybe even vegetarian, very anti-fox hunting, very anti all sorts of things. And your stage of life will give you the beliefs around that. And if you meet somebody else who's at a different stage, i.e. they've been born into a family that goes fox hunting, or supports fox hunting because they're farmers and their lambs have been killed, and has perhaps a different cultural outlook from you, the two of you are going to clash because you're not understanding that you're at different stages of life. You've been incarnated into a stage to learn how to master that stage and make it a vessel for your spirituality. Now, somebody who's at a lower stage can still be in a very spiritual state. And somebody who's a higher stage can be in a very low spiritual state. Your state is pretty much temporary. It's where your mindset is at the time. So if you're feeling clear and wonderful and beautiful, you're going to be in a good state, even if you're in a poor stage. Now, a good state never includes judging other people and being angry with them and throwing bricks at them. And I'm using the fox hunting analogy because it's come up recently in discussions I've been having with people. So it's a useful one because it makes people feel very angry one way or the other. But the point of it is, if you are very anti-fox hunting, but you are being hostile and angry and despising of people who are pro-fox hunting, you are in a very bad state. You are not being spiritual at all. They are at a different stage of life from you. You may not like it, but throwing bricks at them is displaying anger, whether you think it's righteous anger or not, but it is not a spiritual state. Likewise, if you're pro-fox hunting and you're really dismissive of people who are not, then you are in a bad state about them. And one of the things about Kabbalah is understanding that people are at different stages of development, and they're where their soul placed them in this incarnation to learn the best they could. They may be being very unskillful in it, but that's where they are. And Facebook, I find, is a wonderful example of seeing how people work with stages and states. And at the time of broadcast, we just passed a general election in the United Kingdom where the Conservative Party got in. And there is so much angst and anger and worry and fear from people who didn't want the Conservative Party to get in because of they're afraid of things happening to the national health, which would be detrimental, and the welfare state being affected. But they're actually demonstrating very bad states about it. Because if you've learned anything about the law of attraction on your travels in the spiritual world, you'll know that what we put out, we get back. That's also a Kabbalistic teaching and a great spiritual teaching from everywhere else. So if you get into a negative state about something, then you are going to perpetuate exactly what you don't want. So the task of the mystic who transcends religion is also to transcend the stage and the views that the stage will hold. So if you're at a stage that would condemn people who are in another state, then it's hard to be mystical. We have to transcend the feelings of judgment of others to become a mystic. And it's so hard sometimes because we really want to be right. The ego, yes, just so wants to be right about everything. And Kabbalah teaches in all great mystical traditions say, well, you make me right. You can be right as all you like, but you're not going to be happy. And ultimately, the goal of any human being is to be happy. Because to help God behold God, if God is beauty and wonder and love, which we are taught in all mystical traditions, that is exactly what God is, and we are reflections of God, it is kind of our job to seek happiness. It's kind of our job to seek love and to be it and to reflect it. and to shine the inspiration of God out into the world. So actually I'm going to stop it there from the point of view of talking to you about this introduction to a mystery school. It's been a bit garbled, it's gone in all sorts of directions, and mostly because I was trying to use the screen share, and I'm not very good at technical stuff. However, if you want to be part of a mystery school, but not this one, ask your guides and ask God to show you where to go, because where you need to be is where you need to be. If you're interested in further broadcasts or private discussion groups, or you want to know a little bit more, or you're willing to at least come with me on the start of this journey, and I don't know where it's going. I know that having started it, God will guide me as to where it needs to go, but I don't know where that is yet. Again, I just hope there will be many other teachers alongside me along teaching this. We may give it a name. If there is a name, it will be probably La Convivencia. La Convivencia is the name of the time in about the 12th century when the Moors ruled Spain, and when Christian, Jewish and Islamic mystics met together and studied Kabbalah. They didn't call it Kabbalah then, they called it the Way. But they studied together in peace, transcending their own religions, and that's how I would like this to go. So if you are interested, you can find me on my Facebook Spirited page. Please do go along and like that. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook for that matter. And you can find my website, which is Maggy with a Y, whitehouse.com. And I have plenty of videos on YouTube if you want to look at them and find out a bit more about Kabbalah. And basically we'll take it from there. So thank you very much for being with me tonight. And I will hope that we'll meet again soon. I wish you all the best and all the blessings of your life. May you find the mystery school that is perfect for you. Good night and God bless.